I will go ahead and do some introductions. So hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining our financial literacy program here. We are really excited to have this as part of the Student Leadership Conference webinar series this year. We actually asked a lot of students. We sent out a survey to students asking what they'd be interested in learning about at the conference this year, and this was actually the #1 requested session. So we're super excited that it was suggested and that we were able to make it happen. So before I introduce our speaker, I just want to do some housekeeping. I have permitted everyone to be able to chime in vocally using their microphone if they would like. You are still muted, so you just have to unmute yourself. So when Dawn requests that, go ahead and do that. So feel free to chime in. You can also chime in using the chat, and there's a Q&A function on the bottom part of the Zoom page. So I will be monitoring it. My name is Mindy. I work for the MESA statewide office. I will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat to make sure any questions or comments are noted. If we don't get to your question during the session, we'll make sure to answer it and post the answer in the Jumpstart platform. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, you should have received via message or email through Jumpstart a form from me. That's actually, it's called a student activity sheet, and I sent it as a Google Doc. So hopefully you received that. If you did not receive it or prefer it as an email attachment, go ahead and send me an email. You'll find my direct email in the chat function, and I will send it to you as an attachment. That's not an issue at all. I completely understand. And I think that's all housekeeping wise. I will follow up at the end of the session with some more details on the additional sessions we have for next week and this afternoon, as well as the informational interviews that are taking place. So stay on the line to hear about that after we're done with the session. And then without further ado, I will introduce Dawn. So Dawn Nguyen graduated from San Diego State with a degree in finance and has an MBA from the University of San Diego. And he is currently a senior credit officer with City National Bank. So we're super excited that he's joining us today to talk to all of our MESA students. And so without further ado, here's Dawn.
Hey guys, my name is Don, and I'd like to welcome you to this collaboration on financial literacy, where we're going to focus on credit. And I want you to notice I use the word collaboration because I want this to be an interactive experience where you guys are engaged rather than me just sort of regurgitating facts. I mean, we'll get to that part. So I might, ask for you guys to chime in, and feel free to unmute yourselves and just speak up. We have a rather, relatively small group, so it shouldn't be very disruptive. Or if you're shy, feel free to just type something in the chat comments so I know that you're engaged. So as mentioned, I work for City National Bank, and I'm a senior credit officer. So I'm responsible for making the decision whether or not our bank will loan businesses millions of dollars when they request it. So I think that qualifies me for this session. Before we get started, I did want to ask a couple questions. First off, I want to know, who wants to be rich? Anybody want to chime in or just type an A or something in the chat box? Anybody who wants to be rich here? Yeah, we're here to talk about money, right? So, please chime in if you'd like that. I'll just assume everybody's raising their hands here. But who knows what it would take to consider yourself, quote unquote, rich? Like what are we talking about? Like $1 million, 10 million, $1 billion? Anybody care to share what they think rich means to them?
Comfortable.
Comfortable, okay. What does comfortable mean though? Do you have a dollar figure for that?
Not really. I'd say just not worried about money, I guess.
Not worried about
I don't
money.
really, I guess. I don't really.
I like that. Okay, being able to support loved ones. Depends on perspective, area you live in. Livable passive income. These are really good answers, actually. So it's tough, right? And the funny thing, I think, in my years dealing with people and doing a little bit of financial planning previously as well, is that most people work 5 days a week to try to get promoted, climb the corporate ladder and such, and eventually get rich, but they never stop to think about what that means. And so the funny thing is, how do you attain a target that you never actually sit down and set and think about? Now, for me, like some of you guys that have answered here, I believe that being wealthy means having freedom. In this case, financial freedom. The freedom to not work a job that you don't enjoy. The freedom to buy things without worrying about whether or not you can afford them. The freedom to pay off or buy your parents or family members a house in a nice neighborhood that they can live in and essentially retire. Who would agree with me that having these types of means likely puts you in, like the rich baller status? I mean, we're not talking LeBron, but we're talking still pretty baller. Who agrees there? You could type an A or chime in. We can get loud here. It's fine, guys. Agreed, yes. Awesome. Yes. I'm glad to see that most of you guys are in agreement, if not all, because I want to let you know that financial literacy is the way to get there. All of you that have taken the time to be here are already ahead of millions of other people. They teach you a lot in school, but funny enough, they still don't make it a requirement to learn about personal finance and money, at least when I was in school. And I think that that's a disservice because a lot of students come out of school loaded with debt and in financial trouble. So I guess all I'm trying to say is keep up the good work, guys. So going back to independence, we talked about that, right? That's what rich means. By a show of like A's in the comments or whatever, how many people have cell phones with a data plan? Like you're able to scroll through social media and such. Yeah, pretty much everyone, I bet. Some of you are probably scrolling through social media right now, I bet. How many of you guys are on family plans? Let's type a 2 in the comments if you're on a family plan, like your mom or dad pays for it, or you're just sharing it with a bunch of family members. Type a 2. Oh yeah, everybody. You see, this is where it ties into independence. This is my first story about how credit and financial independence sort of tied together. So I was about 16 years old, and back then we didn't have social media, we didn't have smartphones, but we did have these old clunky phones that were cell phones at the time. And I was on my mom's plan because 16. I did have a part-time job, so I was making some money, but I was on mom's plan, and I got in some trouble with her, and she basically yanked my phone and said, you can't use it. And so I said, oh, I'm going to be independent. I'm going to go and I'll get my own phone. I'm working, I'm making money. And so I go down to the store, the AT&T store, I think it was called Singular back then. And I tried to apply. I said, hey, I want a cell phone. I want to be able to talk and call my friends or whatnot. And they say, okay, let's, run your credit. And I was like, well, what's that? And they said, oh, you got to have a credit score. And that's based on that, we either give you a phone or we don't. And, needless to say, I was not qualified because I had no credit score and, I was under 18. And so at that point, I started realizing, I had my first glimpse into how credit and credit scores sort of affect a person's life and livelihood and how they can interact with society. And before you get to the point where, we were talking about being wealthy and not essentially needing all this sort of stuff, you're likely going to have to borrow some amount of money to buy the necessities in life. So it's important to understand how to create a good credit score. So with that, do you guys have the activity sheets that were handed out? If you could, please pull them up. I'll just share mine so that we can all look at the same thing. Let's see here. And then if you guys see me looking up, like not at you guys, don't mind that. That's just because of my setup. I have my camera down here and I have dual monitors above it. So I think I'm not paying attention to you. Let me share this. Okay. Are you guys seeing my screen here? I mean, I have some red ink on mine just because I was taking some notes. Okay. So factors affecting your credit score. And you got to speak up if I can't see the chat box when I have the screen share. So if you can't see it, just let me know. But Some factors affecting your credit score, mainly payment history is a big thing. You see, I made the note over here, 30-day lates are important ones because sometimes people are late by just a couple days. And there's a late fee that credit card companies or other lenders will charge you, but they don't actually report you really like the hard hit to your credit until you're about 30 days out. So you miss like a whole cycle basically. So if you can make a payment, even if it's late by a week or 2 weeks, likely your credit score won't be affected. So keep that in mind because a lot of people don't know that. So payment history, amounts owed. What's important here with amounts owed is if you guys have a credit card, right? And then let's say the credit card company gives you a credit card for $1,000. There's something called a credit utilization rate. And you can write that down, utilization rate. And how that's important is that even though they give you access to $1,000, they want to, they judge you by saying, oh, this person's responsible with their credit if they use below a certain amount. Because they go above a certain amount, there's algorithms that show that people that go above a certain amount, usually they're the ones that get in trouble with their credit cards and they're not able to pay it back. So the utilization amount that's usually important to make note of is 50%. And how you calculate the utilization amount is the amount of credit used divided by the total credit line. So if you have $1,000 credit line and you're trying to stay below a 50% utilization rate, but you don't want to use more than $500 at any given time. I know it sounds weird. It's like, oh, well, they gave me 1,000. But yeah, if you're able to live underneath the 500 amount, close this window. Sorry about that. But if you stay under that 50%, usually it shows credit card companies and lenders that, oh, this person knows how to work within the limits that we set for them. And so they're probably a responsible person. If you can do that consistently, it'll help you with your credit score. Length of credit history, that's self-explanatory. Obviously, the longer you have a credit card open, the more creditworthy it makes you seem. And actually, this is really important. A lot of people don't know this, but as you guys get older and you start attaining more and more credit cards, it's important to note that anytime you close out a credit card, you delete all the credit history that comes with it. And so it's important that your oldest credit card, so if you're 18 or 19 or 20, 21, and you sign up for your first credit card, maybe it's been 15 years, you're 36, you're like, oh, I don't need this old college card anymore. Just remember that when you close that out, you're going to lose that 15 years of credit history. So it might have a negative impact on your credit score. So I'm always a fan of trying to hang on to the credit lines that you have open. Obviously, when you get mature enough in your credit profile where you don't need 15 credit cards that you've racked up over time, you can close some of them out, but just be aware that you might be affecting that score. Okay, new credit. New credit is how many accounts you have, but more importantly, as you see in the red, I have and inquiries. So you hear people talk about this a lot. Maybe if you've been with your parents and they've been shopping, they're like, oh, is this going to affect my credit if I look at this? And this is what are called inquiries. It's when other people look into your credit to evaluate your credit worthiness. And the way that works is there are soft and there are hard inquiries. Think of a hard inquiry as anytime you're really actually trying to apply for something, whether it's a furniture loan, a car loan, a mortgage to buy a house, even student loans. Anytime you're asking someone to look in to give you money is essentially going to be a hard inquiry. Soft inquiries are when you check your credit yourself. I want you guys to write this app down because you're younger and apps are in, and I actually really enjoy this app. Credit Karma, CreditKarma, Credit Karma. You can download that app and it will track your credit score, and whenever you log in, it'll give you the updates. It'll give you monthly updates as to how it's doing. And like if you guys help manage your parents' finances, sort of like what I continually have to do, it might be helpful to have your parents also download these so that you can kind of like help them manage their credit scores as well, if that's sort of like your role in your family. But
I have a question.
Yep.
Does it negatively impact your credit if you keep continuously having that app open or running credit reports?
That's a really good question. So soft inquiries generally don't affect your credit score. So if you continue to look at it, then it doesn't have a negative effect on your credit score. Where you start getting in trouble, and even if you have a hard inquiry, it's not super bad. But where you start getting in trouble is where you have a multitude of hard inquiries happen all within a short period of time. Because what you have to understand is that the reason why inquiries lower your credit score is because a lender looks at it and they say, what's going on here? You know, there's some of that logic that has to go into it. And if it's a bunch of soft inquiries where a person continues to check their credit with Credit Karma, lenders don't, ding them for that, because they realize it's just a person trying to look at their credit and manage it. Whereas if you go out and you apply for 3 credit cards, you apply for an auto loan and, and a jewelry loan as well, now lenders are saying, well, what's going on? This person, it's not like they've started making a ton of extra money, but all of a sudden they're looking to pick up, tens of thousands of dollars worth of credit limit plus these loans. So how can they possibly repay all this sort of stuff? And so it raises a red flag. And that's the difference between hard and soft inquiries. Soft, not so bad. Hard, actually applying for credit, asking for someone to give you consideration. That's when you're going to start seeing an impact on your credit. And the last item on here is the types of credit used. The 2 main things are trade lines versus loans. And trade lines are essentially lines of credit that stay open, and what's the term is called revolve, meaning that you can pay them down. So the most common use of a revolving credit line is a credit card, where you have, like let's say, we'll go back to our example, you have $1,000 credit card. You use the whole, let's say you're responsible to use up to $500 to buy a piece of furniture, and you pay it down each month, $100 a month. Each time you pay it down, your available credit goes up. So you always have access to that full 1,000, and you just don't have access to whatever amount you've utilized. But it revolves, that's the idea. A loan, on the other hand, once you pay it, you're eventually looking to pay it over a certain amount of time and eventually pay it fully off. And so it's not like you pay off a loan and you continue to get more money for the loan, unlike with a revolving line of credit. Those are the 2 main types of different credit. I mean, there's auto loans, there's different types of credit cards and all that sort of stuff, but just remember that those are the main things that you got to pay attention to.
Don, we do have a question in the Q&A.
Sure.
Alex is asking, does opening up a new credit line count as a soft or hard inquiry?
No, so that's a good question. Anytime you apply for credit, just remember when you're asking someone to give you money or give you consideration for something, sometimes even like if you're applying for like an apartment, they're not giving you money, they're looking into your credit, you're giving them your social security number to look at it. Anytime that happens, that's a hard pull. So that would affect your credit typically. Okay, and why don't we just move on? You guys have blank forms, but at the bottom here, as you can see, I filled it out on mine. City National Bank uses something called the Vantage score. And I'll just briefly go into, when you hear the word credit score, 99% of the time, what people are talking about is your FICO score, FICO. And that is short for Fair Isaacs Corporation. They're the ones that essentially started up and developed the credit scoring model. And that's what people are talking about. Your credit score is usually your FICO score. There's something else that, as you can see, City National Bank uses called the Vantage score that was developed for us and other banks to use. And generally the FICO and Vantage score, they both range from 300 to 850, as you guys can see on this worksheet if you guys want to fill out your own for your records. As you can see, the excellent credit score is typically from 781 and above all the way to 850. Good is 661 up to 780. And anything below 600 is you're usually not even going to want to apply for much there unless it's some sort of secured card. And I'll talk about secured cards later, especially for you guys.
I have another question I want to throw out there. And I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but Jai Wen is asking, when should we apply for a second credit card?
When should you apply for a second credit card? First of all, at your age, this is what I did. I'll just tell you my experience, is that I wanted to build credit quickly because I had this sort of negative experience in my mind about being rejected and having that feeling of not being independent and having somebody, essentially look at me and say, oh, you're not credit worthy. that left a really bad taste in my mouth. So what I did was I learned up on how to build my credit score quickly. And the rules are different for you guys than it was for me, because back then credit was a lot more flush. And as an 18-year-old, for instance, they approved me for a $2,000 credit line without making sure I had a job or anything like that. But to answer your question more directly, if you're responsible, whenever you are capable of taking on that second card, if you're talking about when should I apply for it so that it doesn't affect my credit card or my credit score, you'd want to space it out by about 4 to 5 months at least. That's generally around the time where it starts making more sense to add on another credit line. Now, that's not to say let's get a credit card every 4 months. For instance, if you got one, you waited about 5 months and you got another one, I'd wait from there maybe about a year or so, let the credit season a little bit, and then apply for another one. When you're first starting off, though, you'll find that you're going to have to get, likely, and we'll talk about this later, but I'll just touch on it briefly. You might have to get something called a secured card to start off, just because you don't have a credit score. And so credit card companies might be really wary about lending you any sort of money. So if that's the case, typically a secured card, you have to have that for about a year and a half to graduate you into an unsecured card. And once you have that unsecured, I would wait about 6 months to a year and then apply for another one. And then once you start having more seasoned credit, that's when you can start asking for a third or a fourth credit card after 3, 4, 5 months or so. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, feel free to follow up. Okay, and let's just continue on over here. The credit connection. One analogy that we like to always also use is with credit scores and talking to students. You can think of your credit score as sort of like getting grades, like your GPA, right? You got to do certain things. There's certain elements that go into it, but at the end of the day, a higher grade point average will open more doors for you. It'll allow you to go to Harvard, or allow you to go to Yale, or whatever prestigious school that you want. In the same way, a better credit score allows you and affords you certain things. It'll afford you, first of all, to get past the gate and to not see that no at the beginning, like what happened to me when I was younger, where they just say, oh, well, you're not credit worthy. We're not even going to consider you. After you get past the gate, if the better score you have can entitle you to better rates. And what's nice about that is that the better interest rate you have, the less interest you're paying. And so that'll save you more money in the long run, because I don't know if you guys learned about interest rates before, but interest rate is basically what the lender charges you to let you borrow their money. And so obviously you want to pay someone else as little as possible, because anything you don't pay them, you get to keep in your own pocket. So let's just have a look here at the credit connection worksheet, and let's have a look at some of these examples. If anybody wants to answer these, we can do those. Let's look at the first one, private student loan. Eduardo and Peggy are the two people here. I think Peggy's the one that has less fiscal sense, not as financially literate as Eduardo. And so each of them has a $28,000 in private student loans to repay over 10 years. I don't know if you guys can see, let me zoom up here. Eduardo has a much lower rate, 6.8% versus Peggy's 12.8. So he has a much lower monthly payment. I'm just going to show you guys my answer key, since usually you guys are supposed to break at this point and work on it, but we're all here. As you can see, these are the amounts for each of these scenarios that Eduardo would be saving over Peggy. So the monthly amount multiplied by 12 equals the annual savings. And as you can see with each of these examples, basically, because Eduardo, the point is that Eduardo's better credit score affords him the ability to save money versus what Peggy has to do. And what's important here is that savings is great and all, but what's important is that if what you do with those savings. And you guys are still young, but as you get older and you attain more wealth, because you guys are all I think STEM fields, that's what the focus of your group is. But you guys are going to be making a good amount of money if you stick with the STEM fields. And what's important is how you sort of invest the money that you are able to save. First part is saving. Second part is getting a good credit score. And the third part is investing. So what do you do with those savings amounts? And I don't know if anybody's shown you the power of compounding over the time, but for an example, who wants to, Christmas time's coming up. Here's an example. Who would rather have, at the beginning of December, $1 million on December 1st, or what if I gave you $1 on December 1st and I doubled the amount each day through the end of the month? On January 1st, who would rather have the $1 million up front, or who would rather have the dollar that multiplies by 2 over time? Anybody want to come off mute and answer? No?
I would do the dollar just because, like you said, it compounds over the month.
Yes, the power of compounding. I'm just going to stop this share so I can jump back on to you guys seeing here, and I can read the answers here. So if you guys chose the million, obviously you have $1 million, but if you chose the compounding element, $1 that multiplies by 2 and doubles each day, you'd have, after 31 days, $2,147,483. It's a big difference. And sorry, I'm just reading this comment here, but yeah. So as you can see, the power of compounding over time is just so magical. It's I think referred to by Warren Buffett as the eighth wonder of the world. But we can reserve that for another conversation. With that, I wanted to give you guys some time also to ask questions, because I know typically these sessions, people are interested about asking about credit, questions about how they can obtain it and that sort of stuff. So if anybody wants to come off mute at this time or jump in the comment section, please feel free to ask.
We do have some questions in the Q&A. Is asking, for someone that doesn't spend much money often and doesn't have a job, should I apply to get my first credit card? If not now, when should I apply?
Sorry, Mindy, you cut off at the beginning.
Oh, sorry. For someone that doesn't spend much money often and does not have a job, should I apply to get my first credit card? And if not now, when should I apply?
The answer is yes. This is something I want to drive home to you guys. The best time to apply for credit is when you don't need it. Because when you finally do need it, that's when it's really tough to get, unfortunately. And so what you want to do is build yourself up, especially as young folks that at this point don't have much. It doesn't take much to get a really good score at the beginning, because it's once you establish yourself as credit worthy, you start off, I think, in the 700s, and you really have to mess up before they start taking you down. And so I would urge you guys to begin building your credit profile as early as possible, as allowed. And the best way to do that is to start off with seeing if there are student credit cards available out there. The rules have changed a little bit since they passed the Card Act, I think, of 2009. And so before, 18-year-olds could just get credit cards willy-nilly, and credit card companies were giving them out. Nobody was asking any questions. But then a lot of them started getting in trouble and defaults happened. And so people are saying that was predatory lending. And so now I think if you're under 21, they might do some sort of income verification. If I were you, I'd Google, best student credit cards, or I can search for some and post some for you guys. But search for like a student credit card or something like that. If that's not available, what you might have to do is get something called a secured credit card. So the way a secured credit card works is you go to a bank, City National Bank or some other bank that you guys have, and you say, hey, I'd like to get a secured credit card. And what they'll do is say, okay, for a secured credit card, the minimum that we have is, let's say $300. I think that's the lowest amount I've seen for one. And so what ends up happening is that you have to give them a $300 check what they do is they take that money and they put it away, and they give you a credit card that has a $300 credit limit. What you do at that point is that you use the credit card, but you have to act as if that $300 is no longer in existence. Okay, don't act like that's going to be there to pay off your credit card. You have your $300 credit card, but if you use it, use it sparingly. My advice for that first year, especially if you don't have income, or even if you do, just use it sparingly, and buy Starbucks here and there, and then immediately pay off the credit card. And then eventually what ends up happening is that after about a year, I think it's 12 to 16 or 18 months, they will give you a notice that, hey, you've done really well, we appreciate your business, and now what we're going to do is we're going to graduate you into an unsecured credit card. And at that point, what they'll do is they'll mail you back your $300 check, and they might bump your credit limit up to like $500 or $1,000. And at that point, you have an unsecured credit card. But on your credit profile, the whole time it'll show as having this credit card limit open for the last 12 to 18 to 24 months. And then at that point, you're probably, to be honest with you, you're probably going to start getting a ton of credit card offers, because these companies are going to be like, oh, look at this, new young blood with 720 credit score. Let's get them. So
Great.
hopefully that answered your question.
I think that was helpful, and you kind of touched on this, but do you still build credit with a secured credit card?
Yeah, typically I think that's the avenue most people are going to have to start with, is the secured credit card. I mean, if you can find a student credit card that allow you to apply in a secured line right off the bat, go for it. That'll save you, the $300 capital that you have to put up for a year. You'll build your credit just the same.
Okay, Alex is a good question. It says, so ideally, if we aren't using credit line anymore, we can get rid of the card rather than closing the whole account, given that until we establish a solid credit score.
If you mean get rid of the card, like just cut it up, yeah. So the only way a credit card line actually gets closed out and reported to the credit reporting agency is if you call in and you say, hey, I want to close this card out. If you merely by cutting your card up, that doesn't get rid of your credit card, at least your limit to the lender anyways. They still think that your credit line is open, and they'll keep reporting it to the credit agencies as such. But if you're trying to just be regimented and sort of taking care of business that way and restricting yourself, yeah, you can sort of just cut up the card and leave it open. But what ends up happening sometimes is that if you have a credit limit that's open too long without any sort of usage, or then the company might just cancel out your card because they're like, oh, well, you haven't used it in, usually it takes a few years before they'll actually shut down your card line. But that is something that may happen. So I recommend just, sometimes using it once a year, once every 2 years or so, just to make sure they don't shut down the line, because that's happened to me a couple times actually.
I have a question. Some of our students have family members who potentially could be in debt themselves. Mm-hmm. Is family debt transferable to other people within the family?
What do you mean transferable?
So if a family member passes away, is their debt then transferred to their next of kin?
Okay, see, that's a great question. No, generally no. What ends up happening is when you pass away, your debts go against what's called your estate. So when I was younger, I thought estate was only for rich people, but no, when you pass away, it's your estate is essentially like your all your assets and liabilities put together now that you're no longer here. And so creditors, what they could do is they could try to go after the assets in your estate. So if somebody passed away and let's say they maybe had, let's say $10,000 in the bank, but they owed $5,000 on a credit card or something like that, that creditor could go to the courts and say, hey, I have a claim on $5,000 of this person's estate. And the court may decide that, okay, $10,000, we're going to subtract the $5,000 and pay back this credit card company, and then we'll distribute the rest to the heirs. But generally, you won't inherit your family member's debt.
Great. Jaiwin posted in the chat something really useful about which banks can be best for different people, and it's a Reddit thread, so feel free to click on that link that she shared. Thank you so much, Jaiwin. Any other questions that we have for Dawn here? Feel free to post them in the Q&A, or feel free to unmute, and you're more than welcome to say it out loud.
I have a question. Can you describe assets and liabilities? Because I hear that some people get it wrong.
I'm really happy you asked that question. I don't know if anybody here has read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but that was a very eye-opening experience for me. It's the young people use the term woke. After I read that book, I was real woke about finances. But in terms of assets and liabilities, I could jump into what it means for a company, but just think of it this way. An asset, if you think about the words, right? The asset is typically something that will assist you. And a liability typically means something that it never really has a good connotation in our language. And it really means that you're bound by something. And to be bound, think about that, to have something tying you, that's not a good thought to have, right? And so the way that I typically do it for personal finance and based on, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad mantra is that an asset is something that puts money in your pocket. And a liability is something that takes money out of it. And if you guys think of it that way, it'll serve you very well in personal finance because, a lot of times the analogy or the example that's always put forth when people talk about assets and liabilities and personal finance is people talk about the home, person's house. A ton of people will say, like my home is my biggest asset, where in actuality, your home is actually a big liability because that's a huge payment that you have to make, right? People think it's an asset because, you build up the equity in it. That's true to a certain regard. But when we're talking about cash flow, that is a big asset, a big liability. I'm sorry. And so I want you guys, at least in this context, like I said, I could dive into what assets and liabilities actually mean for companies and stuff on financial statements. But for personal finance, always have that idea that you try to accumulate as many assets, things that will produce money, because we're talking about compounding over time, right? We gave that example of the $1 doubled each day over 31 days, turns out to be a huge sum, contrary to what you might think on the face that $1 million would be more. But if you can accumulate an asset that pays you money, instead of a home, what if you had a rental property that was yielding, $500 a month, and you just rented, your a similar, apartment or something, and you only paid $2,000 a month, and your net cash flow would actually work out better than having to pay like a $3,000 mortgage per month. And so try to think of it in that sort of lens. Hope that helps.
Candace is asking the name of that book.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I highly recommend that. If you guys want another book recommendation, another good one is Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin. Your Money or Your Life, Vicki Robin, and Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you could actually, if you don't want to buy the book or anything and you like listening to audiobooks, every once in a while they take it down, but you can find it on YouTube. And it's read. It's like the original audiobook from like the 1990s. So the guy reads it really well. It's sometimes choppy because I don't know if it's pirated or what, but it's really well read, and he really brings the characters to life. But I would highly recommend listening to that audiobook or actually reading the book if you're into reading text.
I have a question. Well, first of all, there's another way. Audiobooks are also available through your local library. So definitely look into that. That's always a really good avenue for that. Can you talk a little bit about, like, some of these students are about to go into their first jobs when they graduate. how to best understand a 401k or a 403b and all of that, and how to know what to do.
Yeah, that's really great. If you are already focusing on your retirement from a young age, you're doing really well. I was lucky that when I was in college, I was a part-time worker, but I worked for Wells Fargo. They had really good benefits, and even for part-time people, they gave us a 401k benefit and a match as well. So the way that it works out when you hear 401k or 403b, those are just numbers in the IRS code. And so don't think that it's like a 401k account. It's like an investment account that's got mutual funds in it, and it falls under the 401k umbrella. So it's not your 401k account. But what that is it's a retirement vehicle. And usually good employers, if you guys are in the STEM field, I imagine you guys will all be working for good employers. What they'll do is they'll do something called a company match. And that's the true benefit of having a 401k at that early age when you begin to start working, is that I recommend contributing to whatever amount that the company will match, because that's all free money, basically. And how that works out is that, let's say you start working at company A. Company A, you get in and the benefits department says, okay, hey, Don, would you like to set up your 401k? We'll match dollar for dollar up to 6%. So what that means is that they'll match me. If I match up to 6% of my paycheck, I contribute 6% of my paycheck each 2 weeks. And I can do more than 6%, but all they'll do is they'll match up to 6%. And what they typically will do is they'll match you in some form of stock. And you can elect which types of stocks that they match you with. When I first started off with Wells Fargo, they matched me with Wells Fargo stock. And currently now City National matches with a stock allocation that I choose. But I always recommend at least going up to the full amount of the match, because some companies, what they'll do is they'll offer it, instead of like dollar for dollar, they'll do what's called like 50% up to 8%. And the way you interpret that is that if you contribute 8%, they'll match a 50% match on that. So essentially they'll give you 4% back in a matching contribution to your 401k. And so I always recommend maxing that out at least to that limit. And then what I recommend instead of going like a full match, which you can do with a 401k, is that you can contribute up to, I think, like 19,500, I believe, is the limit. I recommend going up to the amount that they allow, and then on the side, contributing to your own sort of traditional or Roth IRA. Roth IRAs are really hot right now. And if anybody has questions, you guys can type them out and I can explain the difference if you want, but I don't want to bore you to death. Just remember, contribute up to the max that your employer will do. Number two, max out your IRA, and then if you have anything left over where you can contribute more, then bump up your 401k even more. Yeah, that's all I have for that. Any other questions?
Sorry, I was muted. I was just going to say, Alex just asked the difference between a Roth IRA and a 401k.
Okay, so I'll make this a little bit more lively so it doesn't bore you to death. But a Roth IRA and a traditional, was it a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA? Was that the question?
Traditional 401k.
Okay, well, they're the same thing. So I'll just explain it this way. With a traditional account, what ends up happening is that you're contributing on what's called a pre-tax basis. And so before the government, when you get paid, the government takes their taxes. There's withholding that the employer usually will take out and remit to the government. But before all that comes out, they'll take the contribution to your retirement account, your 401k, let's say. And so the government doesn't tax you on that money. And so that money goes into, let's say, this account. And let's say this account over time, actually, let me backtrack. So that's what happens with a traditional or regular 401k. With a Roth, what ends up happening is that the government takes all their money out, and then whatever's left over, what's called your net pay, you contribute, if you want, an amount of that into your Roth account. So Roth is after-tax money that goes in there. So the government's already got their share, after-tax money is now going in there. That's a difference, post-tax and pre-tax. Post-tax is for Roth. And so the difference between the two is what happens what happens when you withdraw the money. So with the traditional account, the non-Roth account, what ends up happening is that let's say you've been contributing for a number of years and you're retiring now, you're 60 years old, you're like, hey, I'm ready to retire, I need to pull this money out. With a traditional account, your balance, let's say, we'll say for illustrative purposes, you're at $1 million, right? If you're 60 and you want to pull that full $1 million out and you have a traditional account, that $1 million that you pull out for that year counts as income for that year. So the government will think that it's treated as if you made $1 million that year and you're on basically the highest tax bracket. Whereas in a Roth, because the money had been taxed at the beginning, it's growing and compounding over time now without any sort of tax consequence. So the only thing you have to do is reach the eligible age, which is 59 and a half. So at 60, if you have a Roth IRA and it's at $1 million, you pull the whole thing out, there's no problem. There's no taxes. You get the full $1 million out and everybody just goes their separate way. And those are the two, that's the main difference is because you're contributing pre-tax or post-tax dollars on the front end, what happens when you finally take the money out on the back end. I mean, there are other benefits to having a Roth, like being able to pull some money out in between, but yeah, I don't want to jump into those boring details on this call. You can feel free to.
I was actually asking if you have a good resource.
Sorry, was that just a good resource?
Yeah, like a deep dive into the differences that we can share with the group.
I can send something afterwards. I'm not sure if Mindy, if you can, I don't know if there's a distribution list or whatever, but I can certainly send some links. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and share that with me and I will share it with the group. As long as all the students have RSVP'd through Jumpstart, I will make sure they get it. I have one other question before we continue to open it up. Can you explain like when students see an offer letter, if they're offered like $60,000 a year, but what their take home is actually quite different and what your paycheck is. So what are those funny things that come out of your paycheck?
The biggest thing is taxes. If you're smart, you'll do a 401k contribution as well. And so that'll come out of there as well. But you're going to see taxes for not just like federal, but there's federal taxes, state taxes, Medicare, Social Security. So all those things are coming out. Also, if you sign up for benefits, like if you have medical benefits because you want insurance. Although if I were you guys and if you're able to, ride your parents' plan as long as possible. That's my advice to you. But yeah, that's all the sort of stuff that comes out.
Great. Are there any other questions for Don? And like we said, we will share out additional resources for all of you.
Wait, why did you say write your parents' plan as long as possible? I don't really.
Because I think you're allowed to stay on your parents' plan up to age 25. That wasn't an option for me when I was younger. It was born out of the last financial crisis. And so there's a law that allows you to ride your parents' health insurance up to age 25. And if you're able to do that, I recommend it because it's better to not pay it on your own than to do it. But I mean, if you're trying to be a good kid and not put that on your parents, okay. Yeah, pay for it on your own.
And that's part of Obamacare is you can not pay medical insurance till you're 26. But there are some companies who will pay full medical and benefits. There are some companies that do shared payments. And there are some companies that don't pay anything. So that is definitely something to keep in mind when you are looking at your offer letters for your job.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough, guys. Pay attention to your benefits packages. Vacation time, 401k match. Some of these things are negotiable, and a lot of people don't know. They just kind of take it as is. But a lot of times, you might be able to get an extra week of vacation or have them increase their match on your 401k, and those are real dollars that most people don't think about, but it comes into play.
Okay, well, we only have a couple minutes left, and I have some additional housekeeping stuff I want to share. But before I do, just a last call for questions. Last call. No? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dawn. I think that was really informative. I know I learned something, which is very helpful.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, guys, that financial literacy, you guys got to keep up with it. I'm telling you, you guys are going to be light years ahead of your peers if you can get into it. I jumped into sort of financial literacy when I was already in my later 20s. And if I had known back then what I knew now, I'd probably be a millionaire, to tell you the honest truth. I mean, I really truly believe that. It's just because having good financial sense and then investing it in assets instead of spending your whole paycheck on stupid stuff will really compound over time. And if you start early, a lot of these, something that you guys should look into is something called the FIRE movement. It's called Financial Independence, Retire Early, and it's a collection of theories and sort of stuff about how people are able to accumulate enough wealth that they only work until they're in their 30s or so before they're able to sort of, quote unquote, retire off the assets that they've accumulated. And it's really exciting if you can start early and you can think about being retired at 35, 36. It'd be amazing.
I'm already older than that, and I'm far away from retirement, so that makes me sad. Anyways, yeah, we will send you guys additional information through Jumpstart. I want to share a couple things. I just included a Google form in the chat window. Please use that to give feedback on this session and all the sessions that you attend for the conference. A reminder to RSVP for additional sessions. There is a session this afternoon at right following this. That's more of an open networking session that you're more than welcome to join. And I also want to let you know next week's sessions, we're going to be having 2 recruiter panels. So recruiters from different types of companies within the STEM fields will be participating, so make sure you sign up for those. We have a session from Uber on great presentations that will really talk about how to do interviewing, etc., through Zoom, and a technical interviewing session as well. So if you have any questions or issues with Jumpstart, feel free to email me. My email is in the chat, mindy.rieger@ucop.edu. Oh, and it looks like we have a couple more questions that I will ask. Is there a method you prefer to be connected for future help regarding financial help? So I'm guessing you're looking for Dawn's contact.
Yeah, you could feel free to disseminate that information, Mindy. I love helping young people. I'm part of the Big Brothers Big Sisters Club down here, so I'm all about helping people that want the resources. And like I said, I always put myself in your guys' shoes, and I wish I could go back because I would have made a huge change, and it would have been all for the better. And so I'm here for you guys.
So I will send that information. I'll send his email out through Jumpstart as well. And then Alex asked, as far as investing, when do you suggest diving into stocks and diverting your money other places rather than just your savings account?
At your age, so the way, I don't know if you've studied sort of investment theory and sort of that stuff, but what you generally want to do is when you're young and you're making the most amount of money, and you're not very close to retirement age, that's when you're supposed to be super risky with your portfolio allocation. So what I did was in my 20s, I just started buying all sorts of stocks. I mean, I can't say all of them panned out very well, but it's led to a decent return over the last decade and a half or so. And so if you can afford it, what I recommend is having some sort of cushion. So you have a certain amount of money tucked away for an emergency fund, usually about 3 months worth of living expenses. And if you have that saved up, then what you want to do at that point is probably any excess, throw it into some equities. If you don't know what you're doing, the best that you can do is probably just throw it into something like an S&P 500 index fund. And if you didn't catch what that was, just email me and I'll give you a couple of funds that are like really broad market that can take care of that. But what I always recommend is look around you at the stuff that you guys are using, look where the trends are, and then invest in those companies because they're likely making money. And don't blindly just jump into it, but at least look at how they've performed over the last year or so. And if the trend is good and you continue to see things going well, then maybe throw a little bit of money in there. For instance, something that you guys might have that I invest in is, Apple products. I see a ton of people buying Apple. And so I've continued to buy Apple for the last 7-8 years, and it's just been phenomenal for me. I also have recently, I realized that, all the people that use this app have gotten older, so they've had more disposable income. So I bought several shares of Snapchat back, I don't know, 2 years ago or so when it bottomed out. And that's had an amazing return for me because now they're coming to profitability and they're pretty much like the new age Facebook. And so just look around and see things that companies that you believe in and throw a little bit of money in and over the long run you should be okay.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we are at 4 o'clock. So thank you so much, Don. Everybody in the chat, make sure you thank him directly. I just sent you over his email information for Jumpstart, so be sure to check on your messages. And please fill out the survey when you get a chance. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will see you all at the next session.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time. Have a good one.
Thank you.